We're going to take a look at the last section of Module 3 on lesson planning. Here's that section. There's a couple pages introducing lesson planning. There's a page on the lesson plan instructions. There's a file attached here that's a sample lesson plan. And then there's more details on the lesson plan that comes from the instructional design plan. And there's a template that you can use for creating your lessons for this assignment. And you can read through the introduction on your own. I just want to point out a couple of things here. There's, of course, you're going to be bringing your standards into your lesson plans, and if you completed that section of your unit outline, you'll just be able to copy and paste those over into your lesson plans for each of the lessons that you've chosen. You want to review the chapters that covered lesson plannings, in particular Chapter 3 and Teaching in K-12 Schools has excellent lesson planning ideas and also some sample lesson plans. You also should take a look and review Chapter 6, which talks about active, authentic learning. And this is going to be something, as I look through your lesson plans, that I see that you have this kind of active, authentic learning going on in your lessons. Now, as far as resources for lesson plans, whether you already have a textbook that you think you'd be using in a course, that's an obvious resource for teachers. In your unit outline, you're supposed to have already indicated what resources you found from your professional organizations in your content areas. I've provided you with links to some other sources for excellent resources for lesson planning. There's Thinkfinity, and as I've mentioned before, if you're using Thinkfinity, a way of shortcutting the process, instead of searching by keywords, go to your state standards and search by state standards. This has your content area standards in here. You need to choose a grade level and of course your subject area to do that search. If you're already pretty certain of the standards that you're going to be addressing in your lesson plans, then you can go directly to those standards in the search that comes up in Thinkfinity and see what resources are available that you might use in your lesson plans. While that's connecting, another link that I've put on here is to PBS Learning Media. Some excellent resources here. You've looked at the literacies information and you've read articles, and you know how important it is to get a variety of types of resources into your lessons dealing with the various literacies. PBS Learning Media is an excellent source for those kinds of resources, and you can search by grade level in here and subject. Another link I put up was the Smart Exchange. Many classrooms these days have smart boards in the classrooms. How are they being used? Well, it varies from teacher to teacher, from teachers who allow their students to use the smart boards to prepare their own presentations with interactive media, and that's an excellent way of using a smart board in your classroom. Then it's on the other extreme, there are teachers who use a smart board basically as their projection screen, and that's it. So if you really want to take advantage of all the resources available, you don't have to create your own. There's thousands of resources out there already created by teachers to use on smart boards through the Smart Exchange. You can search by your subject areas, however you want to do that, but keep in mind, quite a few resources here. When you click on the search, you'll see that there's a very large number of resources in all these areas for teaching. Let's see, going back to Thinkfinity for a second, here's those standards. Now I selected um, social studies. We've got history that comes up. Your particular standards are listed here um, under the categories. The results are here. You can go in and find out what types of resources are available for your topics that you've selected for your units. Okay, let's see. Going back to this, um, I asked you to review the effective assignments slides that were produced by Harry Wong on that's based on his first days of school. There's also I'll just come to that in a second. Let's go to the lesson plan instructions. You may have already looked at this information on writing educational goals and objectives. Again, placing a strong emphasis on having very effective learning objectives in those lesson plans. They should be very specific objectives. They should be objectives that address the standards, and I'll show you that in the lesson plan format in a second. There's also a link here to that sample lesson plan that's linked in this section on lesson planning. Now, getting into the lesson plan details, you're writing lesson plans on 5 lessons. They should be sequential lessons from your unit. There's a lesson plan template that you can use. You don't have to use a template, but there are requirements for what goes into a lesson plan for this assignment, so you need to make sure that you have all of those elements. The advantage of using the template is right there in front of you, and you basically are filling in the spaces, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Now, for this assignment, we basically, since you don't have an actual classroom of students, although you may be currently teaching, but for the assignment we're providing you with a sample set of students, a classroom of 30 students. I mentioned this before in the overview on the language learner or quiz section of the module, but you're looking at 2 gifted students, 8 students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Okay, so we're talking about a socioeconomic situation here. It says one of the students is from a family that's currently homeless. You've got 5 language learners. It tells you exactly what levels they're at. There's 2 at the intermediate level and 3 at the advanced level. So when you're selecting your standards from your ELP standards and writing your ELP's objectives, these are the students you're addressing. There are 2 special needs students, and for those special needs students, there are some specific requirements that you see right here on addressing their needs. One of your special needs students is in a wheelchair, and that requires modifications. Okay, 18 of your students are male, 12 are female. 3 of your students have been diagnosed with ADD. 7 of your students did not pass the last standardized test exam in math, reading, writing, and social studies. These are the students that you need to consider when you differentiate your lesson plan. Now, by differentiating instruction, differentiating lesson plans, that's exactly what we mean. You're addressing all of your students and all of their various needs. That's a differentiated instructional situation. This is the case for all classrooms these days. I did remember to include that article I mentioned at some point about thinking of differentiating instruction as a concerto in 4 movements, and it's an excellent article about differentiating instruction. Let me see, I think I pulled it up here. We can take a look at it. Yes, here it is. You don't need to read the whole article, but um, just this metaphor here at the beginning gives you some idea of what's going on, what we have to think about when we're differentiating instruction, and making sure that we're attending to the needs of all of our students. The metaphor comes from the sound of music. But there's important information in here about knowing your students, that's a student expertise, knowing your subject, and knowing the cognitive issues involved in instruction, differentiating your instruction, and those kinds of matters that are very important these days when we design instruction. Okay, let's take a look at the uh, template for this lesson and see what goes into the lessons. Be sure as you're completing your lesson plans that you're basically creating one uh, uh, document, and you're going to have a minimum of five. You can have more lessons if you want in this document. So here's the template. Of course, each lesson you're going to identify it by its title. Dates, basically, it's not important what dates you put in here at this point, but you should have something to indicate that, you know, day of the week maybe, or days of the week, or something to indicate how this lesson, where this lesson occurs in the sequence of these lessons. Author and source. Now, it's very important that you identify where you're getting the information for your lesson plans. It, most teachers do not create lesson plans from scratch. They get their information from various sources. Textbooks, as we mentioned, is one source. There are just so many online resources these days that it's unusual to find anyone who can do a good job of teaching without accessing a variety of resources and not just relying upon one source like a textbook. Your subject area, grade area. Now this first section here, this is where you put in your standards on the left side. You've got your content standards from the TEKS, your language learner standards, and then depending on your content area, either one CCRS content standard and one cross-disciplinary standard, that's the minimum, or if you don't have a content area in the CCRS, you can do two cross-disciplinary, and it's your choice. You could have a couple content standards and just have one cross-disciplinary, that's fine. But all of these should be covered. Then on the right side, you've got your lesson objectives. So based on your standards, what are your lesson objectives for this particular lesson in your content area, in the language area, and from those CCRS objectives. Now this lesson plan is a very basic type of lesson plan. The components starting out with an anticipatory set. This is how you focus your students on your lessons. Very often it's called the hook, and the hook basically is what hooks them into the lesson. Sometimes it's a question that gets them to think. Sometimes it's a demonstration that gets them to get some idea of what's going on in the lesson. So however you do this, this is what you do at the very beginning of your lesson to get your students' attention, to get them to focus on the lesson. And in the instructional strategy session, you state just that. Now, to give you an example, if I'm teaching a science lesson, very often I want to get at students' misconceptions about a particular science concept. So my strategy here is to elicit their prior knowledge, their prior thinking about this particular concept. And I do that in a variety of ways. And I put that down as my strategy. And then I have some steps that I go through to get them to tell me or show me what their understanding is of the science concept before we even talk about the concept as part of the lesson. Now the steps section, I like to see things numbered if possible. You can bullet if you like, but it's nice to see things numbered in your steps. These spaces in here, just because they're a certain size doesn't mean you just fill up the space. This document expands to any size that you need to do it. Any number of steps, any amount of information to go in here. And put an approximate time on here for your lessons. So as you go through this, I'm going to have to do another short video on this, but we'll come back to this just so I can take you through the different parts of this lesson plan. So stopping here at the anticipatory set, we'll come back and take a look at the other elements here to finish it.